So I made a video here in this room where I stay on that when I was laying on the floor breathing, saying, don't ask me what I'm doing, ask a Shaolin monk because I'm allowed to show you, I'm just not allowed to teach you.
And so now I'm going to teach you about what I'm doing. And I'm going to just put a narrative together and show you some of my new artwork while I do it. In hopes that my new things won't be burned like my things have been burned over the past couple of years a number of times. And because the laundry machines took so long this morning, I didn't make it to church. So today is March 17th, 2024, which some people call St. Patrick's Day. And if you're Irish or the son of an Irish repo man, then you might be celebrating today. It's really a Hallmark holiday, though, invented by the same people who invented the Easter Bunny and Valentine's Day, St. Valentine's Day, and all them other stupid holidays. But I'm going to tell you about my experience, and the Shaolin monks will tell you they don't know what I'm doing. And maybe they don't either know. Or maybe we all know, and we just don't tell. But it all started with a fortune cookie. Let's get into that real quick. With this fortune cookie,
It's complex. See, years and years and years ago, when I was a child, my parents divorced, and my father, named George, moved out. And then my mother, named Joanne, let a man named George Lee move into the basement, who worked at the United States Geological Survey. He's now retired in San Francisco, if he's still alive, which I pray he's not, because he's one of the men that molested me. Anyways, years and years ago, it was around that time when I was a child, and my father, George, had moved out, and this other George had moved into the basement to molest me, I guess. It's basically, my father, who moved out, moved into Washington, D.C., over in the Eastern Market area on East Capitol Street. And I used to come into the city on the weekends. Well, first he moved into a small room until him and his new lady, or the lady he'd been seeing, they got a place together over in Eastern Market on East Capitol Street. And it was a good old time. Me and my brother would come into D.C. for the weekends. And so everybody who had friends during the week would hang out with their friends during the week. I would come into D.C. and then eventually go to my dad's apartment in Reston, and then eventually go to his house in Leesburg, and then eventually his house in Lovettsville before I grew up old enough and went to college and didn't go to his house on the weekends anymore. Good old dear old dad also taught me something about being international and having an open mind and about the arts and a lot of good things. Of course, I don't need to tell you this, but he studied engineering at Carnegie in Pittsburgh, and he was the first person in our family to go to college. And his grandfather, who is my great-grandfather, was a Slovak man who they brought from digging in the mountains in Slovakia to dig in the mountains in Pittsburgh so the rich people could make more money. And they're rich because when they had an issue with one of their steel mills in Homestead, they send in about 300 Pinkerton men, which today we might just call mercenaries or mercs or assassins for hire or ex-military people. I think the Blackwater people are who they are. They're the kind of people they sent up to North Dakota when there was that issue at Standing Rock, when the oil company, when they built an oil pipeline through a woman's land, which was also where her people were buried. So her cemetery, the construction men came in and forced the pipeline to go through. And when the people from all over the world came from all over the world, excuse me, my tongue is getting tired, I'm so emotional, to promote the slogan Mini Wachoni to the world, water is life. And the simple reason is because they were going to put the pipeline above Bismarck, North Dakota. I think it's Bismarck, North Dakota. But the people of the city were complaining because they said, what if the pipeline bursts? All our water will be damaged and we won't have water. So the oil company said, okay, and they put it south of the city, in this woman's property, in her burial land. And people came from all over the world to support her and to reject these evil people for what they had done to her on her private land, which happens to be a private, as much as I hate the word, a private Indian nation. It's her own land. It's the land of those people. They're not the United States. They're not Canada. But yet these oil tycoons of America and Canada came in with evil men who sprayed water on people in freezing winter temperatures in North Dakota from water hoses. They also shot people with rubber bullets who were standing up for this old lady whose land they took. They shot people with rubber bullets, including in the face, causing people to go to hospitals. They also used some sort of a respiratory gas that some people still have respiratory issues because of. They went to Standing Rock and they were gassed by some of these people. Now, there's a famous recording of a woman calling the police and asking for help. And they say, we'll call the police. And she says, well, I'm calling the police, but they're the ones who are doing this. And then they said, well, call your state representative. So mercenaries. Well, back in the day, Carnegie and Frick and the other oil tycoons or gas tycoons or steel tycoons or whoever these people are with all this stuff, they hired 300 Pinkerton men to come in on barges on the Monongahela River and go into Homestead and take over the town, take over the steel mill, and teach those people a lesson about who defines who gets to work at those steel mills and who gets to earn what money and who gets to keep all the money and the prize and what workers need to shut up and go back to work or else face the pain. And in fact, those Pinkerton men did come into that city. And it was just around World War I, I think just before World War I, when the big excursion, or shall we say fight or battle, happened. When the people with money sent in men with guns who were ex-military to go in and shoot it up. And some people were killed. There was a small excursion and a couple of years later, a large excursion, or flipped around a large excursion in a couple of years, a small excursion, where these people fought for the mill and fought for their lives and their families to have living wages. Let me just put it this way. We don't have thriving or dream life wages here in the United States. We scrape to get by, and that's when we work full-time or part-time, 2 jobs. That's a whole nother issue. But let's get back to this fortune cookie. I was a kid, right? I was here in D.C., but in another section of the city, and my dad and my stepmom got Chinese food for me and her and for my brother and for me. And honestly, she could have bought it. She was working as well because they were both strong people who both worked full time and had a good ethic. Anyways, my father had a career at Pepco before he took his retirement and went to start a new career at Bechtel, which is an international company where he traveled the world doing engineering projects as a contractor and a buyer. He does contracts management, buying things to build power plants and airports and other big things because he knows about that stuff. Good old dad, George. But they brought food home or he went out and got it. He probably went out and got it and had me sit in the back of his Datsun and my brother. And he said, you boys stay here. I'll be right back. Except for he forgot to order it before he left. So he went inside. I was in for 20 minutes while we sat in the car. And it was hot. And it was the evening. It was summer. So we're sitting in the car sweating. And if we got out of line, he'd knock us in the head once or twice. But he never beat us to hurt us, just to teach us. And that's fine. Anyways, we got the Chinese food. And I didn't really know what it was. Little did I know, my father and my stepmother also had chopsticks, and they taught me and my brother how to use chopsticks and to eat Chinese food with chopsticks, and that was our first time. And afterwards, they're like, look, a fortune cookie. I'm like, what's that? And I opened my fortune cookie, and the fortune said, help me. I'm locked in a Chinese fortune cookie factory. And I'm pretty sure it was a joke, but maybe it wasn't, because I started to investigate. And then I started wondering, where is this factory? Is this in the United States or another country? And then I started wondering, how is it cheaper to make Chinese fortune cookies in another country and then bring them here? Why don't we just make them here in our factories? And then I realized what had happened because I spoke to some politicians and some smart old people, because old people know everything, basically. And they said, I'm sorry to tell you this, Nathaniel, but these factories in other countries are kind of like slave dens, and they don't have to pay those people very much anything at all. And in fact, some of them are slaves, and they live on the property, and everything they earn at that factory, they have to pay back to the factory owners when they buy new clothing or laundry soap or a spoon or a bowl or anything that requires production, because they control the stores and the marketplace. And I asked one of the really smart old people. They said, I don't know what country they're in. There's lots of countries that have these things going on. The United States is where it started, but they had to move the factories to other places because people in the United States were getting intelligent. Even though we weren't supposed to learn to read and write, and we were supposed to be afraid of God, well, we realized that God loves us, and the true people of God have taught us that. And then you know what they taught me? They said, I'm sorry, but you can't do anything about those poor trapped people in those fortune cookie factories. You can't help them. The world never changes and you can't help them. And I thought to myself, well, the world does change. Am I allowed to talk to my elders and tell them what I feel? And I remembered when I prayed with some of my elders and they held my hands and they just said, give it to the Lord. So I started saying, God. And then I heard the Lord chime in. And I said, I'm not talking to the Lord. I'm not in a Catholic church or any of this other stuff. I talk directly to God. And I asked the Pope and all the other synagogue and mosque leaders and all the other holy leaders to just get out of my way for a minute. And I started to talk to God directly. And there's even a pastor now at Shiloh. His name is Mensa. He said it's a privilege 3 weeks ago in his sermon to talk to God directly. It's a privilege. I forgot to remind him that we're Baptists, and I can't tell this to them. They're the leaders and the elders at the Shiloh Baptist Church here in D.C. But it's not a privilege to talk directly to God. That's just what everyone's told. Everyone should have a personal relationship with God. So I started praying to God about this and what's going on with this factory. And I realized there's lots of factories. And then I realized there was still slavery here in the United States. And that little voice in my head said, hey, when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation to free all the slaves in the United States, that was a great thing. But it was also a tactic of the war, the Civil War. And guess what? Slavery didn't end. They just took it off the books, child. And I looked at my elder and I knew she was correct. And I started thinking about, was it one person as a slave in a Chinese fortune cookie factory writing fortunes for the world? Or was it lots of slaves in lots of factories and on lots of farms? And are some of these places where we're told that are evil or we're not allowed to go, is that really where they breed the slaves and raise them and then sell them and send them to different places all over the world? But my elders wouldn't say anything when I asked them about that. They said, give it to the Lord. And that's what's called a vision or a dream or what a seer does. A seer, spelled S-E-E-R in modern American English, is what's called a person that can see the future. A seer is also called a prophet. The thing about these famous people from history who are spiritual leaders, they were that and then some. The amazing thing is there's lots of seers and prophets today. Even around me here, just in Washington, D.C., they're actually everywhere. The question is, are they good or evil? Are they trying to help the people escape from those slave factories and from the slave condition worldwide? Or do they work for the slave factories and use their magical gifts from God as evil for their work, quote unquote, work? And if you do, you're fucked. Because guess what? You already know what happened to those fortune cookie factories and those workers, because you can see the future. But guess what? In the past and in the future, there's been lots of pasts and there's been lots of futures. And what I've done, me personally, is brought all the pasts and all the different timelines into one. And we are now one. And there is only one future. And all you evil people are now seeing false visions and false futures. And that is what you have all lived for. And now you will learn that. And I've shown the world some miracles. I've shown the world miracles. Yes, I stumble in my words, but I've shown miracles to the world. Miracles, you say. Miracles, only God can perform miracles. Let me ask you if you've noticed any spiritual books that have changed in the past year or two. And if you are a reader of spiritual books and of the major religions, you know your books have changed. And I, Nathaniel Shelhays Vizdos, am the one who did that. And very few of you will ever see my work or my videos or any of this or know it was me. But for those who are watching, who are paying attention, who are ready, this is just to let y'all know I'm ready as well. Ready for what? Shit. I told you before, ask a Shaolin monk. I'm only allowed to show you. I'm not allowed to teach you. And they're not teaching you nothing or telling you nothing unless you're one of their disciples. And now I have to go, leave this place where I live, where I don't have a key to my room or to my apartment, but there's security here, and there's lots of different people living here. And now I have to go beg for money so that I can get some money and have a little bit of money to do with what I need to do with money. I hope you enjoyed looking at my art, and I hope you enjoy your life. Eternal blessings of health and wealth to my family forever and forever. Let me repeat that. Eternal blessings of health and wealth to my family forever and forever and forever and forever. So help us all, God.